the surface level and really understand what's driving things.
That sounds about right.
So today, we're tackling something that might genuinely change how you view successful companies, especially, startup success.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got this really intriguing piece. It's called Founder Mode. Relatively recent, written last September, I think.
That's the one.
And it digs into a talk by Brian Chesky, from Airbnb, and it really questions some core assumptions about running a business.
Okay, let's get into it then. Because
Yeah.
for the standard advice, the one everyone gives is basically hire good people, then get out of their way.
Right. Sounds logical. Empower the team. Let them run with it.
Totally reasonable on the surface. You build this great team, give them autonomy, and the company should just scale smoothly. But
Yeah.
this article points out something pretty counterintuitive.
Yeah, it says that for a lot of really successful founders, following that exact advice, well, it actually caused problems as their companies got bigger.
Which is weird, isn't it? You'd think that's the right way to scale.
It's a real head scratcher. These founders, they built something amazing from nothing, right? Then they try to bring in these best practices for management and suddenly things start to go sideways.
The source really leans into that tension.
Yeah.
It highlights how founder after founder found this advice was, I guess, hurting them.
Exactly. Damaging even.
So that brings us to what we really want to unpack today, this whole concept of founder mode. What is it, actually?
Yeah, and why is that conventional wisdom potentially, wrong for founders specifically?
And what does that mean for how companies are built? It's not saying founders should never delegate, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's a different way, especially earlier on.
Precisely. The piece suggests there might be these two fundamental operating systems, if you will, founder mode and manager mode.
Okay.
And for a long time, the thinking has been you scale up, you have to shift from that initial founder-led thing into a more traditional management structure.
Like it's an inevitable transition.
Yeah, inevitable. But the experiences the author cites, and you look at companies where founders stayed deeply involved, it suggests, well, maybe it's not so simple.
This is where it gets fascinating because it touches on the mindset difference, maybe. The author of Founder Mode floats this idea that the standard advice, hire great people, give them room. It's actually built for professional managers.
Right. People running established machines, people
Yeah.
who weren't there for the messy creation part.
Exactly. So for the person who had the original vision, who built it brick by brick, that hands-off approach can feel wrong. And the force basically says, often it is wrong for them.
It's this idea that founders have this unique operational style, maybe a set of instincts, and standard management thinking kind of pushes that down.
Suppresses it.
Yeah. The article hints that founders do things, specific things, that professional managers just can't or don't. And when the founders stop doing those things because they're told to manage, the company loses something vital.
Like the original spark you mentioned.
Core direction, maybe.
Which makes you wonder, and the author clearly do too, why were all these founders getting advice that didn't fit?
And the conclusion reached in the piece is pretty sharp. The standard management playbook is mostly about running someone else's company, not the one you poured your soul into creating.
Wow. Okay.
Connecting that dot, it implies we've maybe fundamentally misunderstood the founder's role as a company grows. The source even uses the term gaslighting.
Really? Gaslighting?
Yeah, to describe how founders might feel. They're told their gut feelings are wrong, that they need to be more hands-off, more managerial, even when it's clearly not working for their company. It's unsettling.
It is unsettling to think you'd be pushed away from the very things that made you successful in the first place.
Exactly.
Okay, so if manager mode isn't the answer for these founders, what does founder mode actually involve? How does it work?
Well, that's the thing. So the source is up front that this is still kind of emerging. There isn't a textbook for it. You don't learn Founder Mode 101 in business school. It's mostly being figured out, in the trenches by founders experimenting, seeing what works for them. Trial and error.
So how do we get a handle on it then, if it's not clearly defined?
The piece gives us some pointers by contrasting it with that traditional management thinking. And one big area seems to be how the company is structured internally, how the pieces fit together.
Okay.
Specifically, it questions this idea of modular design in organizations.
Modular design. Explain that. What's this black box idea they talk about?
So think about how managers are often trained. It's a bit like Well, an assembly line. Each team or department does its specific job, handles its module, and you don't necessarily need deep insight into how the other modules work.
Right, you manage your direct reports, they manage theirs, tidy boxes.
Exactly. Departments become these sort of self-contained units, black boxes. You delegate down, trust your leaders to handle their subtree, as the piece calls it.
And poking your nose too far into those boxes is seen as...
Micromanagement, which is, generally frowned upon, big time.
So the traditional view is like Lego blocks, manage each block. But Founder Mode sees it differently.
That seems to be the core insight, yeah. Founder Mode suggests it's maybe less like Lego and more like a complex organism. Everything's interconnected.
Right, okay, so you empower your leaders, let them run their areas.
Yeah.
But the source implies that's exactly where the problem can lie in Founder Mode.
Precisely. The piece circles back to that classic advice. Hire great people, give them room. Sounds perfect.
It still sounds good.
It does. But then the author drops this bombshell, based on talking to founders in practice, that can sometimes turn into hire professional fakers and let them drive the company into the ground.
Oof, that's blunt.
It's incredibly blunt, but it really drives home the potential downside of being too hands-off, especially when the founder's unique product sense or vision is critical.
So if founders in Founder Mode aren't treating departments like these separate blank boxes, what are they doing? How does it look different day to day?
Well, the source suggests it often involves breaking down those traditional hierarchies. Specifically, it says the standard idea that the CEO only talks to their direct reports. That probably goes out the window.
Interesting.
Instead, you see more skip-level meetings.
Skip level, meaning...
Meaning the leader, the founder in this case, meets directly with people who are not their direct reports. Maybe 2-3 levels down the org chart.
Huh. That is a big departure. It suggests a much more detailed involvement,
Yeah.
even as the company gets bigger.
Definitely more direct. And the piece uses a great example, Steve Jobs.
Ah, okay. What about him?
His annual retreat at Apple, the Top 100 retreat.
Right, I've heard of that.
But the fascinating part, according to the source, is that it wasn't necessarily the top 100 people by job title or rank.
Oh.
It was the 100 key people, the crucial contributors, regardless of where they sat on the formal org chart.
Wow. That really cuts against the grain of traditional hierarchy, doesn't it? Imagine doing that in a huge company.
Takes some serious conviction. You'd need to know who those key players are, not just rely on titles.
Beyond just, meeting people further down the chain, what was the point, do you think? What was Jobs trying to achieve with that?
Well, the thinking is, it let him keep a direct finger on the pulse, right? Ensure the core vision was getting through, connect key people across different silos, maybe foster that shared mission.
Keep some of that startup energy, perhaps?
That seems plausible, yeah. The author suggests it helps a big company stay agile, helps communication flow better, and the fact that Jobs did it consistently implies it was really valuable, even if it's not standard practice elsewhere.
Which just highlights how much we maybe don't understand about this Founder Mode yet.
Absolutely. It underlines that it's still being figured out.
So it sounds like Founder Mode is less about strict org charts and more about the founder staying deeply connected to the core of the business, even as it scales.
Yeah, but, and this is important, the source doesn't say founders can run a 10,000 person company, like a 10-person startup. That's impossible.
Right, some delegation has to happen. You can't be in every meeting.
Of course. The crucial difference in Founder Mode seems to be how and where you draw those lines of autonomy, and how rigid they are.
So not just delegating, but being really strategic about it. Knowing where your direct input is absolutely essential.
Exactly. And the source suggests those boundaries might even shift. Maybe a manager proves they really get the founder's vision, so they get more autonomy over time. It's more fluid, perhaps.
Okay, so Founder Mode sounds potentially more complex, more nuanced than the standard Manager Mode playbook.
It definitely sounds less standardized.
But the payoff, according to the article, is simply that it works better for a company still driven by that original creator.
That's the argument. And we sort of see anecdotal evidence, right? Founders who intuitively operated this way, even before it had a name, have often been incredibly successful.
And that ties into another interesting prediction in the piece.
Yeah, which one?
That once we really grasp Founder Mode, a lot of founders we currently think of as, well, eccentric or maybe control freaks, we might realize they were just operating according to these principles all along. Their supposed quirks were actually key to their success.
Ah, that makes sense. Reframing their behavior through this new lens.
It's like we're close to maybe identifying a whole different way of leading, of building companies. And the author ends on a pretty hopeful note,
How so?
basically saying, look how much founders have achieved despite often getting advice that wasn't quite right for them. Imagine what could happen if we understood founder mode better.
Right, if we could give them more tailored guidance, support that way of operating instead of trying to force them into the manager mold.
The potential for even bigger breakthroughs, more innovation.
Absolutely. The piece really hopes founder mode eventually becomes as understood, as legitimate as manager mode, and that this understanding could unlock a huge amount of potential.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The big idea we've explored today is this concept of founder mode.
Yeah, a potentially very different way for a company's creator to lead, especially as it grows, compared to what we think of as traditional manager mode.
And the really surprising thing is that the standard advice, the hire great people, let them run idea, actually seemed to hinder really successful founders like Brian Chesky.
Right, which leads to the puzzle the source raises. Why did seemingly good advice backfire for them specifically?
And the insight offered is that the advice is maybe geared towards professional managers in established companies, not the original visionary founder.
Exactly, someone running it versus someone who is it, in a way.
And we touched on some potential characteristics of founder mode, drawn from the source,
Yeah.
like questioning that black box modular approach,
Being skeptical of treating departments as totally separate.
more direct engagement from the CEO, like skip-level meetings,
Yeah, going beyond just direct reports.
and these unconventional strategies, like the Steve Jobs retreat, focusing on key people over formal hierarchy.
Right. But we also have to stress this is still early days for understanding founder mode. No set rules, no curriculum yet.
It's being defined by founders, doing it, figuring it out.
Largely through experimentation, yeah.
But the prediction remains. Understanding this better might explain the eccentricities of past successful founders,
And, maybe more excitingly, help future founders achieve even more.
which leaves us with a final thought for everyone listening. Think about the companies you really admire. Do you see glimpses of what might be founder mode and how they operate?
Yeah. What could be the key differences you notice between a company run that way versus one run in a more traditional manager mode? And what are the trade-offs, the pros and cons of each as a company gets bigger and evolves? Something to chew on.